to welcome everybody to tonight's webinar from JCAN, Massachusetts. Just a little about JCAN. We have a whole decarbonizing curriculum. The webinars that we do around a decarbonizers program for your congregates, setting climate goals for your synagogue, or benchmarking, which is calculating your synagogue's carbon footprint. If you haven't been to any of our webinars, we're glad that you're here for this one, which is part of our decarbonizing curriculum. And if you want a recording for any of the our webinars, just go to our website, which is jewishclimate.org, and click on webinars, and then click on a button for asking for the recordings. We also do various programs, like the one about accelerating heat pumps, or talking about the JCAN Mass Energize collaboration that we're doing with them that is very effective for reducing carbon footprints of synagogues, and also the Solar for Synagogues program, where there's lots of different programs. We just did one last week. If you want any of these recordings, again, just go to our website, jewishclimate.org, click on events, and then you can click on the button for the recordings. If you'd like to make a donation to JCAN so that we can continue doing our work, you can just go to our website and click on the donate button. So I would like to welcome you all tonight, and to welcome David Schreiber, who is a financial advisor, and is very excited to be here tonight. And he will tell you a little about himself. And take it away, David.
Mute. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. I'm going to go to screen share and show you the presentation in a moment. I've been involved with JCAN just about since it started, and I am currently vice president and active with a subcommittee we call the Legislation and Regulations Group. And we would welcome anyone who would like to join us. So let me share my screen and go to my presentation. And then when I'm done, and I hope to get through it fairly quickly, so there's plenty of time for questions and responses and thoughts. What I'm going to talk about is why you should invest fossil fuel free, what it is, where you can find what it is, and how you can go about doing it.
Yes, it's fine. Great.
All right. Let me tell you, my sources for this show are publicly available sources of information, Morningstar and MSCI, which I've gotten courtesy of the First Affirmative Financial Network. Green Century Funds has been very helpful, as has the Shalom Center and Vanderbilt Securities in providing me with the materials here. And this information was obtained from sources that we believe to be reliable, but we cannot guarantee its accuracy. It's just public information to the best of our knowledge. This is not a presentation or a solicitation to buy or sell any securities. You must speak directly to your financial advisor in order to get any financial advice. And as we always say in this business, past performance is not a guarantee of future results. So, you know, this is what it's about. You know, even if this weren't the core problem, that we're heating up our planet, we would still create a better world by taking these steps. And one of the easiest and simplest steps is to get your money out of fossil fuels. We only have one planet, and we'd better preserve it for our children, their children, and their children, and future progeny. In order to do that, we have to confront those in power that are dumping carbon on us, or as Rabbi Arthur Waskow refers to them as the carbon pharaohs. And I'd like to quote or misquote Winston Churchill here. He once said of democracy that many forms of government have been tried and will be tried in this world of sin and woe. I'm going to substitute capitalism for that in terms of forms of economy. No one pretends that capitalism is perfect or all wise. Indeed, it's been said that it's the worst form of economy, except for all the others that we've tried so far. So we have to work with the tools we have at hand. And those tools are what's presented to us in a capitalist environment. So that means using as little carbon as we can possibly get away with in the form of fossil fuels, et cetera, reducing our carbon footprint. And it also means divesting our investment portfolios, our savings, from exposure or support for fossil fuels. And if you own fossil fuels, you own climate change. Well, how do you know if you own fossil fuels? Almost all of you have retirement funds in one form or another, be they 401k, 403b, 557, I think is what it's called, and some corporate profit sharing plans, depending on who you work for. If the funds you are in, or those programs, include index funds or target date funds, you unfortunately most certainly own fossil fuels in them. You don't have to own those funds. If you're in a 401k, you can turn that into a self-managed IRA, and you can invest in funds that are fossil fuel free. And one of the things that when you're invested in fossil fuel funds, not only are you helping them finance their activities, or rather you're helping them finance their activities, which include lobbying, which include, recently here in the Northeast, we have a program, a development off the coast called Vineyard Wind. And recently a lawsuit has been brought by what I strongly suspect to be what's called an AstroTurf group, to block it, arguing that it is violating all kinds of environmental regulations, and it hasn't passed through certain federal and state regulatory judgments. In fact, it has. Lawsuits are very expensive. Individuals seldom have the capital, unless they're are the former guy, seldom have the capital to fund such things. So I'm absolutely certain, although I haven't been able to track it down, that one of the fossil fuel organizations, whether they be directly companies or the American Petroleum Institute or Gas Institute or some similar group, is funding this. So divestment doesn't have to reduce the total investment in fossil fuel corporations or bankrupt a company or succeed as a tactic alone, but it contributes tremendously to the growth of a powerful climate change movement, and it takes away the social license from fossil fuel companies. And studies have shown that there will be negligible, or that they're likely to be negligible long-term negative impact from investing. It can help investors avoid companies with high capital expenditures and lower dividend payments. And you are likely, if you stay with fossil fuels, as people who had invested in coal companies have, they've run into the risk of holding stranded assets. There's stuff they cannot sell because it's not worth anything. So we need to stop providing financing to an industry that has profound influence on government policy, as I've mentioned, that can fund campaigns to drown out opposition and litigate indefinitely. It has driven climate change. It has poisoned the environment through fracking, pipeline spills, and leakage, well fractures. And it aggravates social inequality through refinery siting, pipeline and compressor location in poorer communities and on Native American lands. Well, even if it had no effect on climate change, the cessation of burning fossil fuels would improve health just by reducing the pollution it causes. And it would reduce the degradation due to extraction and would likely replace concentrated sources of energy with distributed sources. So as I said, it will reduce the chance of holding devalued and stranded assets. Now, here are the 20 top carbon majors with their attributed emissions to CO2 and methane. Now, unfortunately, this is already almost 3 years old. I haven't got a more current one. I'm hoping that one will come out soon. As you can see, the little red tip is methane, but methane is a much more powerful greenhouse gas than even carbon dioxide, and is released whenever drilling is done for oil, because there's always methane mixed with it. And they try to burn it off, which is a hell of a waste, but most of it leaks. All right, so I guess I've sold you on divesting from it. What do you do with your money then? You want to look for maximum impact in socially responsible investments. And one of the ways of doing that is to put the consideration of environmental, social, and governance and corporate governance criteria alongside financial analysis when you select an investment. That slide is courtesy of Trillium. I think it says so there. That's a wonderful asset management company here in Boston. It's sometimes argued that the returns are not as good. But here's a slide that starts basically in 07 and runs through 21. I have a more updated one to follow. It compares the S&P 500 as represented by an exchange-traded fund called GSPC, that's the blue line, with the Domini Social Index, which is the red line. The Domini Social Index was deliberately designed by Amy Domini back in 1999, in fact, to be a shadow of the S&P 500. And after tracking it for 15, 16 years, 17 years, they turned it into an exchange-traded fund so you can actually buy this on the stock market, like a mutual fund. And you could also buy the Domini Index Fund as well from the Domini Mutual Funds, or the Green Century Equity Fund, which is like the Domini with absolutely no fossil fuel exposure, at least in their balanced fund. Now, this slide runs right up to beginning of October or early October. You'll notice the red line, the Domini, is well ahead until the invasion of Ukraine, where all of a sudden fossil fuels are making money. It's like that. Here's an example of the kind of thing we encourage investment in. This is an investment in lumber in tree farms called EcoTree. It's the development of the Polonia fortunae or elongata, depending on where they're growing it, not the tomentosa, because if you know about this tree, there is a variety that is invasive. These two have been specially cultivated so that they are not invasive. This is a tree that produces hardwood lumber after 10 to 12 years, depending on where it's being grown. It sequesters 10 times the amount of carbon that a pine or any other hardwood would sequester, and most hardwoods take a century to mature to harvestable maturity. It enriches the soil it's in. It grows deep roots, which hold soil. It can be grown in rather depleted soil. In fact, Jimmy Carter has a plantation of it on what had been cotton fields, and cotton is a very heavy feeder and really depletes the soil. And it brought a very nice harvest recently. One of the other great advantages of these trees is, as you can see, they have very big leaves. They also have spectacular blossoms from which a very delicious honey can be produced. Because of the big leaves, I don't know if anybody here is old enough to remember Al Cap and the shmoo. This tree is like a shmoo. You look at it and it produces honey and it produces wood and it produces shade where you can grow, as you see on both the left and the right. Coffee and bananas grow very, very well in the shade of this tree. They seem to be fed as well by the nitrogen fixing of the tree itself. When mature, the tree can be harvested. The World Tree Group takes the first harvest, markets it, splits the profit 25% to World Tree, 50% to the farmers, 25% to the investors. The farmers get to keep the rootstock, and the tree will repropagate 7 more times. You can get 7 useful harvests out of the same stump. So that's the kind of thing we look for in our approach to impact and socially responsible investing, environmental investing. There's really nothing new about this approach. The Quakers launched it initially in 1898 by avoiding investments in weapons, alcohol, or tobacco. It's gone through a number of transformations, but it continues till today. In 2014, as you can see, the UN Principles for Responsible Investment, which were started in, I think, 2012, now has 45 trillion under management following those principles. But there's more to it than just the investing. You also have to think about the savings. And the Shalom Center in Philadelphia has done a lot of work in this, and they've created this Move Our Money, Protect Our Planet, mom and pop, to help guide synagogues and other institutions that want to divest from fossil fuel companies and reinvest in companies with sustainable values. So you can find some information at the shalomcenter.org. You can find some information at greenvest.org. Social Investment Forum is also another good place. And one of the things you need to do is think about where you're keeping your money, where the banks are, because while oil companies are very rich, the cost of building a pipeline, of sinking new wells, of exploring for other resources is extremely high. And they have to do it by borrowing money because they assume they're going to make a big profit out of it. Hopefully they won't anymore, but once the war is over anyway. These are banks that funded the Dakota Access Pipeline, which the Biden administration has stopped, thank God. But there's several other pipelines in the works that we have to fight against. And one of the best ways to do it is to make sure that these big banks don't have the money to do it. Where do you go with your money? Look around your neighborhood. You've got community banks, you've got cooperative banks, you've got credit unions, and many small banks that only serve a limited area. These banks tend to return a fairly good interest rate. They do not nickel and dime you to death with extra fees, as many of the larger banks are notorious for doing. That's really what I urge you to do. You'll see a list here of The largest investors, Citigroup, TD Securities, Wells Fargo, Ing Bank, JP Morgan Chase, Bank of America, etc. So this slide is already a year old, and you can see that there's quite a bit of, oops, why did this change? Here's where I want to be. Quite a bit of money already reinvested, 14.68 trillion by faith-based organizations, educational institutions, philanthropic foundations, governments, pension funds, and etc. So it's up to us. We have to organize. We have to get together. We have to let our legislators know that it's time to stop giving the fossil fuel companies tax benefits and subsidies. It's time to start legislating, moving those subsidies onto renewable energy, onto different systems of storage. A lot of effort has to be made here. So it's up to us, folks. Let's get at it. Oops, here's some information sources. If you want to see them in more detail, email me and I'll copy this slide and get it out to you. Most of these sites here, rather these articles, were produced as of 2017, and I could get you more updated material. So once again, let me remind you, past performance is no guarantee of future results. And this information was obtained from sources we believe to be reliable. And I'm pretty confident about it, but we cannot guarantee it. Thanks for your attention, and I thank you in advance for good questions. Here's where you can reach me. Our website is greencentury.eco. Bet you didn't know there was a domain.eco. We had to twist some arms to create one, but we've got it. And my email is david@greenvest.eco, and my phone is 781-640-2182. Thanks. And that's the end. And here we go. I welcome your questions. I see this stuff in the chat already. David is really fuzzy, it says. I hope my answers aren't fuzzy. So please raise your digital hand. Oh, we've got, okay. Mark Niederberg, please.
David.
Gang, excuse me.
Yeah, thank you. So I have a close friend. He inherited some stock in one of the big fossil fuel companies, and I've been talking to him about divesting, and he basically says, well, it doesn't have any impact. And you know, I followed your presentation, and you know, I'm concerned that what you said so far would not be sufficient to convince him. And I'm wondering what I might be able to say to him, or what you would say to him that would convince him that if he sold this stock, you know, he might have large capital gains to deal with if he did. If he sold this stock, that it would have some impact on, you know, the climate change and ecological situation.
Okay. Well, let me answer first of all. I don't know how long he's been sitting on this stock. If he inherited it recently, then he's not going to own much in the way of capital gain. Secondly, because of this,
He inherited it a long time ago, David.
Oh, this is a problem. Then the best thing to do with it is to take advantage of the tax benefit he'd get by donating it gradually over time. He could either put it into a donor-advised fund, in which case he could deduct the entire amount.
David, actually, that's not the issue. He's pretty smart about financial stuff. He could figure this out. His point is, it's not going to make any difference, so why should I do it? You know, people have been divesting for years from fossil fuel companies, and look at what's happened. Nothing. So
Yes,
what do you think?
what happens is that the fossil fuel companies take their profits and buy their stock back so they maintain the price. But sooner or later, that's going to turn into a strain. They're going to have trouble maintaining that kind of artificial boost. And if enough people divest, it will have impact. It's like, why should I vote? My one vote's not going to matter. But it does. It adds up. I hope that convinces him.
No.
I see Donald has his hand up. Donald
Yeah.
Ross, please.
Can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Well, I guess for David, just to answer that, he needs to do it like with a group. You get Harvard to divest or an organization to divest. But I mean, the minimum he should do is, as was said, move it into a donor fund or so where you can get the tax deduction, but you write to the company and you tell them, I'm divesting. This is why I'm selling the stock. And then you still get you don't have to pay the capital gains, and then you get to donate it to places and take the tax deduction. I'm sorry to bother you, but is a very technical question because we are building reforesting in Nicaragua with different kinds of trees that we're trying to have the local people grow for all the reasons. And I didn't get the names. Yeah, maybe you can just put them in the chat, the names of the two good versions of the tree, and then the bad name are the one that's
Okay, I will be happy to do that. You might email me.
buy them and start using them too.
Okay, you might email me at david@greenvest.eco, and we can do two things. I can give you the names of the trees, including the invasive one.
Yes.
And I can also give you a link to the people at World Tree who could be especially helpful in getting this thing going.
World Tree. Okay. You can give me the link there too. Okay. Thank you.
So just send me an email, please, Donald. And by the way, Mark, if your friend does move this into a donor advised fund, it can then, it can be self-managed if it's large enough. He can then have the fossil fuel stocks sold out of that donor advised fund, reinvested in something more productive, and not suffer the capital gains tax. So again, have him get in touch with me. I'll explain how it works. I've done this for a couple of people already, and they've been very happy about it.
So Rabbi Zub asks, if one divests from funds which are involved in fossil fuel companies, they will be bought up by others, so that net result is zero.
It is zero, but if we communicate when divesting,
Right.
we can start pushing things. And if it's a significant amount of money and we publicize it, as well as writing to the company, the PR advantage is established, especially when it's a major endowment, a charity, an institution that has significant amounts invested. The impact of Stanford University's divestment from coal, which took place about a decade ago, took a few years to really hit, but it really hurt. It really hurt the coal industry. Just ask Senator Manchin.
Are you, let's see, did you talk about the changes that you've seen in recent years in carbon disinvesting?
I have this, that's why I had that slide, which I said was about a year out of date now, about the amount of money that's been divested from various organizations. And as you went down the list, you could see at the bottom, there were individual divestments. It is now, I could go back to my slideshow and check, but I think it's something like 43 trillion has been divested. This has got to be having some impact. The fossil fuel industry is going to deny it right to their grave. It has recently come out that ExxonMobil's scientific staff reported to them back in the 1970s, 50 years ago, they projected what the impact of burning all of the fossil fuel that ExxonMobil was projecting to market over the next half century. And they were projecting what impact that would have on atmospheric pollution and temperature rise. And it's been shown to be remarkably accurate. And of course, ExxonMobil hasn't done a damn thing about it. But another point about ExxonMobil was that recently a hedge fund was created called Engine Number One, with the specific focus of taking over some seats on the ExxonMobil board to try and force them to change their business model. They have succeeded in getting some seats on the board. Let's see, the ideal thing, Mark, would be for your friend to divest from fossil fuels and invest in Engine Number One. I see some questions in the chat.
Steve Shapiro asks, it looks like Morgan Stanley is producing studies and information promoting ESG investing, while at the same time, it was one of the funders of the Dakota pipeline.
Yes, there's a
Greenwashing.
very rich tradition of hypocrisy in this. I won't deny that, but there are alternatives. As I said, if you're looking at mutual funds, there's Green Century that has been doing quite well. There are a number of funds offered by Pax World, a fund or two offered by Parnassus. There are also exchange-traded funds that focus specifically on clean energy, and even more tightly, there's one for solar power that trades under the symbol TAN, and another on wind power that trades under the symbol FAN. I have to appreciate the humor here. And there are a lot of alternatives that are actually quite financially viable in terms of retail investing.
Are there any credit cards that you recommend?
Well, I'm using something. I should remember this. I use a card called Living Future. There are a few others out there that seem to be a bit better. This one works through Visa, so I'm a little skeptical. But credit cards have become an important part of our current systems, and it's awfully hard to live without them. And someone's asking, are you or JCAN connected and working with Dayenu? The answer is yes, we are. Our focus as JCAN is very much local. We are JCAN Massachusetts. We work very much on local legislation, on local events. We are involved with Breathe Clean North Shore to block the peaker plant they're trying to put in Peabody. We're working with, I'm now blanking on the name of the group, to block the substation that Eversource is trying to put in Eastie, which is right next to the fuel tanks for Logan Airport and a foot above Chelsea Creek, which is very likely to flood and short things out. I can't understand how stupid they are about this. There are a number of things we're working on. Called EC Substation. Thank you, whoever filled that in. Green Roots is the organization. Thank you, Maria.
David, I have a question. I retired from USC, University of Southern California, and a lot of my retirement money is in TIAA CREF. And I don't really have control over that fund or that money.
yes and no. You could roll it into a self-directed IRA. You're allowed to do that without penalty and then invest it where you wish. TIA does have some fairly good light green funds. But I'd be happy to go over what you've got with you and show you what your alternatives are.
Oh, thank you.
I could just comment on that. I have TAIA craft too, Tim, or now it's just not craft. But they have a social policy fund where I have my money invested. And
Right.
I assume it's not only fossil fuels, it's guns and other bad things that they aren't investing in, but I'm assuming that you could move if you just have a regular TIA craft account. I mean, I think you could talk to them too about, saying you're not having them include in your account.
I would suggest, Donald, that you go to asyousow.org, and they screen funds very, very well. Enter your fund symbol on their website, and they'll show you how much fossil fuel exposure you have. I would recommend that to everyone, in fact.
Could you say that again? What's the group you just said?
As you sow.
As you
From the
sow.
biblical, as you sow, so shall you reap. It's called asyousow.org.
I
And-
put it in the chat.
Yeah, they have a number of very good tools.
SOW? SOW?
SOW, yeah. Yeah, yeah, John.
Yeah, I think we've been talking mostly about stock funds. How about bonds? Bond index funds.
Okay, there are bond index funds that are fossil fuel free. Green Century, I think, has one. I'm trying to remember who else. There's also an exchange traded fund that trades under the symbol GRND. No. Yeah, GRND, I believe, that focuses on green bonds. Again, you can use as you sow to check for some of these, not all of them. They haven't gotten to 100% of the funds yet, because they're a huge number out there. There are Green Century Balanced Fund, which includes bonds, has been fossil fuel free now since the mid 90s. It was the pioneer. Somebody asked, what does light green mean? What it means is that it uses a screening technique that allows an awful lot of stuff to get in there. And I kind of use it as a slur. Fred, you had a question?
Okay, David, great talk, and I hope there's a lot more great questions. There's already been a batch. So let me throw this at you, and if you've already addressed it, I apologize. Can you talk a little bit about government investing, to the extent that government entities have holdings and are responsible for holdings? And do you see prospect for change as governments wake up more and more to the realities of climate, and perhaps you might, if my stream of consciousness makes sense there, state of Massachusetts has just gone through a hopefully significant change in administration.
This is one of the things that our Legs and Regs committee is working on here in Massachusetts. The city of Cambridge, I'm trying to remember Quentin's last name now, Zondervan, alderman or whatever, that city council member in Cambridge, has been instrumental in getting Cambridge to divest from fossil fuels and look to other potential investments. I wouldn't mind finding some allies on the Boston City Council. I believe Brookline has done so, has divested. I think Newton, there's a movement in that direction. So we're making some headway, and the best place to start is grassroots, community by community, working up to state level. Whether we'll ever be able to get to the point where the likes of Florida would do so, or Texas, I don't, kind of doubt it. Or whether we'll see it on the federal level, but we're working at it.
And this great commonwealth that we live in?
We're making some real headway. I think it may be possible within the next few years that we'll hit a critical mass of towns that have divested from fossil fuels. And the representatives from those towns, their senators and legislators, will start pressuring for the state to do so.
We've got a new climate, whatever her position is, climate czar or whatever. So I'm just going to throw it out there that maybe we can leapfrog over all that.
We know that, and we're trying to figure out points of access. Yes.
Thank
Thanks.
you.
I'm pretty sure that Deb Goldberg, I believe is her name, is like the state treasurer or something like that.
Treasurer, yeah.
Has already, even in the previous administration, and under the Republican administration, was working to make the state retirement funds ESG or fossil free. So I mean,
I
they're
believe
on
you're
it.
right. Yeah, it's the kind of thing that something of that size cannot do in one stroke. It does take time, but there are many things that are moving in the right direction in our state of Massachusetts, our Commonwealth. I'll put it that way, of Massachusetts. I'm happy I live here.
Go ahead, John.
Okay, just getting back to the question about the guy who has, the inherited, highly appreciated oil company stock or something like that. I don't know. I mean, if that's a substantial portion of that person's portfolio, I think there's a little bit of this particular danger. I mean, they should at least diversify.
I would agree.
I mean, that we're predicting that oil companies are going to, be tanking over coming years and decades.
They must.
So when it's going to happen, but it's going to happen as renewables take over. It's, you probably should pay that not so huge capital gains tax and get yourself into a green index fund.
Whether it happens because taxation and other structures and governmental rules and competition from renewables makes them impractical, or environmental collapse destroys the demand. I don't know which will happen first. I hope it will be the growth of renewables that completely displace the fossil fuel. We're already seeing it here in the automotive industry. Why did Tesla just cut its prices by about 20% across the board? Because Ford and Chevrolet and Mercedes-Benz and BMW have brought electric vehicles to the VW, excuse me, have brought vehicles to the market, electric vehicles. And you've already got them coming from Kia and another Japanese car, Nissan, that are providing real competition in the electric car market. So there's a growing demand there and a growing competition. And the writing is on the wall that the internal combustion engine or infernal combustion engine is on its way out. But there's a lot more work that has to be done, as Fred knows quite well in building renovations, retrofits, carbon footprint reduction in institutions, etc.
Great segue, David. Can you, every couple of years, I ask you and others, do you see prospects for particular funds or even stocks that are specifically invested in not renewables, but the very diverse and widespread and hard work of building retrofit? Have you seen stocks?
Yes,
And
there's a company, outstanding company right here in Framingham, Mass. And if you drive on the Mass Pike, you'll see some of their work. It's called Amoresco.
Yeah.
You see those solar panels that are powering the Framingham rest stop.
Yeah.
And a couple of other places. They have done tremendous work. Their business is retrofitting and energy enhancing buildings that exist.
they're good. They've been doing that good work for many years. They're
Yeah.
in the category of ESCOs. Maybe you see them in a category, maybe you see them singly. I don't know.
No, there are other companies that are similar. I don't recall them off the top of my head. Amoresco was one of the leaders, still is one of the leaders in the field. There are others. I focused on Amoresco because it's just down the road in Framingham.
Yeah, energy service companies.
Yeah,
good way
yeah.
to go about it.
Somebody asked, how are these funds in terms of expenses? The exchange traded funds have very, very low expenses. It's their nature. They are a kind of passive index that rebalances on an annual basis. And they also trade normal, like a stock does on the stock markets, as opposed to mutual funds that are not as, some of them are more active than others. And of course, when you're dealing with an index mutual fund, like Green Century's equity fund, they have to keep going back to the companies that they brought in and rescreen to make sure they haven't strayed. One of the great things that Green Century does is it's a leader in shareholder activism, in pulling together coalitions of shareholders, not just those who are in the fund, but reaching out to any and all who own shares in X company to influence the decisions of that company. And they've been quite successful. And if you're interested in seeing details, just email me, I'll forward them to you.
So I have a comment to make.
Yeah.
And someone, I don't know if I'm saying your name correctly, but Mayim, is that how you say your name? Okay.
Mayim.
Yes. Mayim said something about the Dayengu campaign, which I wanted to bring up because they are doing a campaign to get Jewish institutions, not just individuals, but all our synagogues, our federations to divest. And that's a really important campaign that I think we need to pay attention to. And a lot of our synagogues have big endowments invested, and that's where we have some power, is to organize around disinvesting in those institutions. That's all. Thank you.
Now I see a question in the chat talking about the danger of investing. Do you think the fossil fuel stocks may face trouble from recent price gouging, war profiteering? I certainly hope so. I certainly hope that there will be some kind of inquiry or something that publicizes it. Right now, there's a tremendous amount of pushback against our local sources here in the Northeast, Eversource and National Grid, that have upped their prices insanely, obscenely, to take advantage of the situation. And at the moment, nothing is happening, but I'm hoping that the new incoming administration in the state of Massachusetts is going to call them to account. But it's not going to happen without us, we the people, pressuring. So we'll have to get our act in gear. And again, this is not just a matter of divesting from fossil fuels. If you really want to have impact, you've also got to take political steps and organize. Looks like Fred's about to say something.
Well, about the price gouging and or war profiteering, just it's not local. It's not just local. It's a whole northern hemisphere of the world. This
Yeah.
winter has experienced exorbitant price hikes. And how much? Yeah, and how? So it's an open question in my mind. How much of that is the war profiteering? A whole lot is, but how much is? It would be great if that were to be examined and people called to task. Okay, I do wonder, David, if you would like to get back to Maria's point, because you have done significant work in the direction that she was asking about, that is going to Jewish institutions over the years, and synagogue by synagogue, or larger groupings of synagogues. You've had made some efforts in those directions. Would it be okay to talk about that now?
Yeah. Well, I've had some conversations with the Combined Jewish Philanthropies, and Rabbi Zub, who's on this call, has also been involved very recently in trying to get the Combined Jewish Philanthropies to make a public statement about its investment policies, hopefully that they are not invested in fossil fuels and they're getting out of it. And, some of these things take time. I've been working on it for a couple of years now, and it's hard to tell whether we've made headway or not.
Can I say something about that? So if anybody knows people on the board of CJP, they would be people you should talk to about this.
I see that Rabbi Zub has unmuted. I hope he has something to say on the subject.
Yeah, I think it's going to take more than just a few board members and more than just a call or two, that there needs to be some organized pressure, maybe groups of rabbis, maybe groups of citizens to really make CJP sit up and take notice, because otherwise it's just kind of, they pass it along a little bit. So I think that, yeah, contacting board members is one step, but it has to be kind of an organized campaign. And we have to figure out how to do that to get more than just one or two people involved in this endeavor.
Could you say a little more about how you would go about doing that kind of campaign?
I think the Massachusetts Board of Rabbis might be one institution where you could get a whole group of rabbis to endorse this policy. Maybe groups of synagogues could ally themselves and do the same thing, and so that it's a multifaceted endeavor is what I think it's going to take.
Mm-hmm.
I agree. That has been my assumption, that it's going to take the equivalent of torches and pitchforks, right? Mark, I appreciate what you wrote about. Actually, one voice can make a difference. Can you also see the chat? There was a state house race in New Hampshire in 22. That was tied 970 to 970. And this is special election to determine who wins. Yeah, there was also here in the state of Massachusetts, there is one legislative seat that is still pending with a 1 or 2 vote difference after multiple recounts. It's somewhere in the west of the state, I think around Springfield, but I don't recall exactly.
Thanks, David. And of course, if you talk to a few people, you can swing more than one vote. You can swing dozens or scores of votes, depending on
Right.
time and effort you want to put into it.
Yeah. There's a wonderful quote. I wish I could remember all of it, but it was never think that one person can't have any influence. In fact, it's the only thing that's ever had any influence.
I think that was Margaret Mead, and she
Yeah.
said,
I think it was Margaret Mead. Yeah.
and she said a small group of,
A small group. Yes, right. A small group of dedicated people.
right.
Yeah.
Very good.
I have a way of garbling quotes. So, but I do appreciate the Winston Churchill that I started with. I love that one about where he said democracy is the worst of all possible systems, except for everything else we've tried. So, okay, well, we've run our hour. Yeah, Fred.
I just want to say on behalf of JCAN, David, thank you so much for doing this program. It's fantastic, and I hear it every couple of years, and it's always great to hear. And it's always new and it's always exciting. And I just want to throw out, you talked about pitchforks and what was that? Pitchforks and what?
Torches and pitchforks,
Oh,
you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, from the Frankenstein, the original Frankenstein movie.
All right, let's leave it in the Frankenstein movie, hopefully. There's plenty enough fascists coming around these days. But I would like to introduce a possible, and you're getting to ending, so maybe ending with a positive note that I do see fog lifting, veil lifting. I'm hoping that our new governor and the new climate chief, not czar, climate chief, will be part of that. I've heard just in the last few days that Biden is coming from the executive offices at the federal level. There'll be a PR campaign. I say there must be a major change in perspective in the general population. It is coming soon, and fascists won't stop it. So that's what I'd like to put out there, and hopefully this is so we don't have to come with pitchforks. People will open doors.
One would hope. Okay. We don't have to finish the work, but we can't stop doing it.
Thank you.
Thank you all so much for coming. If you have other questions we didn't get to, please email or call me with them. I'll do my very best to answer. Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.